Welcome to this video tutorial. I aim to provide an introduction to evaluating research methods in order to gain those valuable higher marks in your exams. According to the specification, students need to analyse and evaluate sociological theories, concepts, evidence and research methods in order to present arguments, make judgments and draw conclusions. Specifically in this one, we're focusing on the evaluation and the research methods part and look at how you can maximise your marks. So you may get an exam question asking you to evaluate the advantages or disadvantages of a method, like the example I've given from 2018 paper 3. So let's assume that you get something similar on documents. So how would you go about answering this question? So breaking down the question, you need to ensure that you demonstrate a range of advantages or strengths. Why would sociologists use it? What's the benefit of this method? Make sure you give some examples of studies that have used them. That will hit the sociological research part of the question. And finally, focus on the main trigger point, which is the word evaluate these advantages. So just to consider some top tips, make sure that you aim to evaluate it as you go along rather than bolting on the disadvantages at the end. If you do that, it's just an opposing paragraph highlighting these disadvantages would be classed as juxtaposition, and you'll probably find yourself with a maximum marks of about 12. So try and be specific to any point that you have made. For example, any strength that you have given, your evaluation should link to that. So let's consider these 4 strengths and how would we evaluate those specifically as we go along to avoid juxtaposition. So let's have a little look at the first one. So this may be the only source of information. So for example, when studying the past, it's hard to interview somebody from 200 years ago, for example. So things like parish records, paintings and child rearing manuals are really useful as documents to give us insight to what it was like 100, 200, even 500 years ago. Now we can evaluate this by suggesting, and we could use Scott's criteria, is it representative? Is it typical? So not all documents survive or are available for the researcher for use. So are the ones that you do get access to typical or representative of the ones that you don't? And also think about the people that would have had some of these documents 500 years ago, for example. Only the wealthy tended to be literate or be able to afford to have paintings made of them or be able to write diaries. So they might be overrepresented. They are classed as a cheap source of data because somebody's already collected this, and this saves time also. However, this might be in a private collection, so access might be restricted. So you've got a bit of a practical problem there. Or it might be in a museum, so you have to pay for access. So that idea that it's always cheap, it might not be as cheap as you think. Personal documents such as diaries and letters give us insight. They use qualitative data and they're favoured by interpretivists. Practically, they are time consuming to analyse. Qualitative data does take longer to analyse a lengthy document such as a diary. And applying Scott's criteria once again, it might lack credibility. So people, when they are writing diaries or letters home or doing an autobiography, for example, they may embellish the truth or they might lie, or it might be written years after the event. So it's based on a recollection or a memory. And it may be needed to be interpreted in a different language. So if we were using Anne Frank's diary, for example, translation into English might mean some of the meanings or the words might have changed. Another strength is content analysis. So using documents such as newspapers or Lobban, who she looked at reading books, they used to quantify or count how many times something appears. It's quite cheap, it's a little bit quicker to conduct. It creates objective quantitative data so we can measure trends. Now, a problem with this is, according to interpretivists, just by counting the number of times something appears tells us nothing about what meanings might we attach to that instance. And finally, the question did mention sociologists, so ensure that you do link it to our theoretical perspectives. So interpretivists instead see these as authentic versions of the author's view. They give us insight into their worldview and meanings, whereas our positivists reject the documents. They lack reliability, generalisability and representativeness. So massive thank you for watching. If you have found it useful, click the like, share and also subscribe.